BlackRock, why do you see it everywhere? What is it? Is it a bank? Or do you think it's an AI data center? The truth is BlackRock has the ability to control the systems money flows through. And what you need to be aware of, how it is your business. It's your business to know because not only do they control trillions across global markets, governments, and corporate infrastructure, even through your pension, your bank, your investments, and even the companies you buy from. Whether you realize it or not, BlackRock influences your financial reality. How is this possible? The rise. It's possible because BlackRock did not begin as a global force. It began as a small, overlooked idea, an idea built on something you probably take for granted, and that is information. As information is power. So, how do you think a company you never interact with ended up shaping the financial world you live in? Well, first, who was the founder? The founder is Larry Fink, and in 1988, he had already tasted both success and humiliation on Wall Street. And he made a very crucial decision that would change the direction of global finance. After losing hundreds of millions in a single miscalculated trade, he realized something most people in finance still ignore today. Money isn't the real power. Risk is. Whoever understands risks controls the system. And whomever controls the system controls the world built on top of it. This powerful insight became the foundation of BlackRock. Therefore, Larry Fink didn't want to build another investment firm. He built an infrastructure, a company for global finance, a system that could see risk before it happened, measure it, predict it, and eventually influence the decisions of the institutions that relied on it. You might think that sounds like a simple ambition, but in the world of markets, that's equivalent to building the operating system of capitalism. And that's exactly what BlackRock did. While other firms chased returns, BlackRock chased information asymmetry. While others built portfolios, BlackRock built technology. And while others competed for clients, BlackRock built something far more valuable: dependence. If you wanted to understand your exposure, your vulnerabilities, your liquidity, and your stress points, you needed BlackRock. So, at this point, this is how BlackRock became not only dependable, yet unpredictable and unavoidable. BlackRock created a system called Aladdin, a risk analysis platform so powerful, so deeply integrated, and so widely adopted by others that it quietly became the backbone of modern finance. Aladdin doesn't just analyze markets. It monitors them, simulates them, and in many ways, shapes them. It tracks trillions in assets, thousands of portfolios, and the hidden connections between them. And Aladdin is not just used by BlackRock. It's used by banks, governments, pension funds, insurers, and corporations around the world. You might not use Aladdin in your own businesses, but the institutions that control your money do. And that means BlackRock sees the risks inside your financial life long before you ever will. Let's think about this for a moment. Can you imagine BlackRock? It really built a whole new world. As BlackRock grew, it positioned itself not as a competitor, but as a partner, a neutral, data-driven advisor. That neutrality became its greatest strategic weapon. Governments trusted it, banks trusted it, corporations trusted it. And in moments of crisis, when markets collapsed and fear took over, BlackRock became the one institution everyone turned to for clarity. This is what you should also aim for. Be the rock that other organizations need. Because in 2008, during the global financial crisis, BlackRock wasn't just another firm trying to survive. It was the firm the US government hired to help stabilize the system. They were given access to the balance sheets of collapsing banks, toxic assets, and the deepest financial vulnerabilities of the global economy. And once you see the system from the inside, you don't just understand it. You influence it. You become the backbone. By the time the world recovered, BlackRock wasn't just an asset manager. It was the quiet architect behind the scenes. The company understood the risks, the flows, the leverage, the liquidity, and the psychology of global markets better than anyone else. And whether you realize it or not, that's when BlackRock's rise stopped being a story about finance and became a story about power. But to get to this level of power, what type of challenges do you think they faced, and how do you think they handled them? The challenges. The challenges BlackRock encountered were not small. They were structural, political, and deeply psychological. Ones where you could easily decide another route, which means that the first major challenge was trust. Imagine trying to convince governments, banks, and trillion-dollar institutions to hand over their deepest financial vulnerabilities to a company that is younger than your bank or government existence. You wouldn't trust them either. BlackRock had to prove it wasn't just another Wall Street firm chasing returns. It had to demonstrate that it understood risks better than anyone else. And trust in finance is earned through accuracy, reliability, consistency, and the ability to see what others miss. The second major challenge was scale. Managing billions is one thing. Managing trillions is another. The larger you grow, the more your decisions ripple across markets. One wrong move can destabilize entire sectors. BlackRock had to build systems capable of handling complexity at a level most firms never reach. You might think scaling is about hiring more people or opening more offices. But in BlackRock's world, scaling meant building infrastructures, technologies, data pipelines, and risk engines that could process global markets in real time. The third major challenge was visibility. The more influence BlackRock gained, the more scrutiny it attracted. Regulators questioned its size. Competitors questioned its neutrality. Politicians questioned its power. And you should understand this. When you operate at the center of global finance, every decision becomes a geopolitical signal. BlackRock had to navigate a world where perception is as dangerous as reality. The fourth major challenge was crisis management. Every major financial event, from the dot-com crash to the 2008 meltdown to the European debt crisis, forced BlackRock to prove whether it could stand firm or collapse under pressure. And each crisis brought the same question. Can BlackRock stabilize the system without becoming the system? That's a tension few companies ever face. Because how do you manage a crisis for your own business, let alone other businesses? And the final major challenge was dependence. When institutions rely on your technology, your analysis, and your risk models, you become indispensable. But indispensability comes with responsibility. If BlackRock's systems fail, global markets feel it. If BlackRock miscalculates, entire economies absorb the shock. That level of dependence is both a strategic advantage and a constant threat, as there is the constant pressure of when is the next recession. As recession doesn't just affect one organization, it affects the whole economy on a global scale. So now the real question becomes, when a company faces challenges this big, what moment forces everything to change? What event pushes BlackRock from influence into dominance? And also, what do you believe their major turning points were? The turning points. Because as you know, turning points do not just happen by accident. They happen when preparation meets opportunity, not by sheer luck. So, for BlackRock, the first major turning point came during the 2008 financial meltdown. Yes, in 2008, 20 years since they were established. While banks collapsed, markets froze, and governments panicked, BlackRock was one of the few institutions with the technology, data, and risk infrastructure to understand what was actually happening. You can already imagine the scale of chaos, trillions evaporating, liquidity disappearing, and entire sectors on the brink. And in that moment, the US government turned to BlackRock not as a last resort, but as the only organization capable of analyzing the toxic assets choking the system. This wasn't just a contract. This was access. Access to the deepest financial vulnerabilities of the global economy. And once you see the system from the inside, you don't just understand it, you shape it. The second major turning point came when Aladdin evolved from a risk tool into a global financial operating system. You might think software is just software, but Aladdin became something else entirely. The central nervous system for institutions managing trillions. Banks, pension funds, insurers, and sovereign wealth funds, they all plugged into BlackRock's infrastructure. And the moment the world depended on Aladdin, BlackRock crossed a line. It was no longer just an asset manager. It became the silent architecture behind global finance. You don't get more powerful than that. With that type of power comes great responsibility. You can only wish to imagine the feeling everyone at BlackRock had, not just Larry Fink. The third major turning point came from global expansion. BlackRock didn't stay American. It embedded itself into Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and emerging markets. It advised governments on debt, infrastructure, energy, and long-term investment strategy. And here's what you need to understand. When a government trusts you with its economic future, you're no longer a company. You're a strategic partner in national policy. Before we get to the next major turning point, so far it may sound far-fetched, but you can relate to these major turning points. Do you see how one idea can turn into ideas that shape other people's lives? Simple, yet genuinely genius if you stick to having a vision and an open mind. And so the fourth and final major turning point came from crisis after crisis. Every time the world shook, whether through recession, geopolitical tension, or market volatility, BlackRock wasn't weakened. It was strengthened. Because when everyone else panics, the institution that understands risk becomes the institution everyone relies on. So now the question becomes, once a company reaches this level of influence, what strategies does it use to maintain control? What do you think BlackRock did? The strategies. The strategic steps that they made allowed BlackRock to maintain control without ever appearing controlling? Because power at this scale isn't loud. It's subtle, tactical, and built on decisions that now you will take full notice of. The first major strategy is neutral positioning. BlackRock never presents itself as a competitor. It positions itself as a partner, an advisor, and a stabilizer. You might think that sounds simple, but neutrality is one of the most powerful strategies in global finance. When you're neutral, everyone trusts you. Governments trust you. Banks trust you. Corporations trust you. And when everyone trusts you, you gain access to information no competitor could ever dream of. Because you are neutral, you still have to play mediator between competitors. So they value you, your time and business. The second major strategy is infrastructure dominance. BlackRock didn't just build Aladdin as a tool. It built it as a dependency. And you need to understand this clearly. When your technology becomes the backbone of global finance, you don't need to force influence. Influence comes to you. Every institution plugged into Aladdin is indirectly plugged into BlackRock's worldview, risk models, and decision-making logic. That's not just strategy. That's architecture. That is a magic carpet that everyone can sit on, and that includes you and your organization. The third major strategy is global embedding. BlackRock didn't expand like a traditional corporation. It embedded itself into national economies. It advised governments on debt, energy, infrastructure, and long-term investment. And when you advise a government, you shape its priorities. You shape its policies. You shape its future. You might not realize it, but this is how companies become part of the system rather than just be external. The fourth major strategy is how they leveraged crisis. Every crisis is an opportunity if you're prepared, and BlackRock always is. When markets panic, institutions look for clarity. When governments freeze, they look for guidance. And when the world shakes, the organization that understands risk becomes the organization everyone relies on. You've seen this pattern before. The more chaos there is, the more valuable BlackRock becomes. As every problem has a solution, and that is what BlackRock does. They provide solutions for many organizations and governments. And when you have the government's support and you actually helped, it doesn't matter which policy changes or whichever political party is elected in office. You win. The fifth and final major strategy is long-term vision. BlackRock doesn't think in quarters. It thinks in decades. It invests in trends before they become trends. It positions itself in sectors before they mature. And it builds relationships before they're needed. You can learn from this, because long-term thinking is the difference between reacting to the world and shaping it. So now, with all that said, let me know, if these are the strategies BlackRock uses to maintain global influence, what lessons can you take from them? And how can you apply these strategies to your own business, your own decisions, and your own future? But just before you say what lessons you can take from them, there are more lessons to learn that are way deeper. Do you know what these deep lessons are? Before we get into these deep lessons, it is very important to know that there are patterns. These patterns go far beyond just finance. Because behind every decision, every expansion, every moment of influence, there are deeper lessons about how people behave, how power moves, and how ambition compounds over time, not just your ambition, but other people's ambitions that drive organizations towards its success. And once you see these lessons, you can't unsee them. Your first lesson is that human behavior drives everything. Yes, that is correct. You heard right. As people don't just follow institutions because of their size. They follow what feels stable, predictable, and competent, that the people within the organization are relatable and provide what they need. BlackRock didn't demand trust. It became trustworthy because of their actions. And whether you realize it or not, the same thing happens around you and your business. People gravitate toward whoever reduces uncertainty, whoever brings clarity, whoever makes decisions easier, and whomever provides the quality services and assurance they desire. The second lesson is that money follows confidence, not noise. Capital does not chase hype. It chases structure. When you help others see clearly, when you remove confusion, when you provide solutions instead of adding problems, you become valuable. BlackRock mastered this. They didn't just manage assets. They managed certainty. And certainty is something people will always pay for. Have you ever noticed what once you have a structure in place and you and your team are confident, the cash just flows? The third lesson is that decisions are emotional before they're logical. Some people react first and justify later. BlackRock flipped that dynamic. They built systems that removed emotion and replaced it with data, risk modeling, and long-term thinking. If you can learn to pause, to think beyond the moment, to detach from impulse, you instantly elevate your strategic power. As when you have enough time to think and enough data to analyze, you will be able to achieve far greater things in both your personal and business life. Which brings us to the fourth lesson, which is identity shapes behavior. BlackRock never acted like a traditional asset manager. It acted like infrastructure, like a foundation. An identity determines how you move. If you see yourself as temporary, you make temporary decisions. If you see yourself as essential, you start operating like it. Your identity becomes your strategy. How do you see yourself, and how do you see your organization? Which leads to our fifth and final lesson, which is ambition compounds quietly. Not loud ambition, not ego, but disciplined ambition, the kind that builds over decades. BlackRock didn't chase attention. It created an infrastructure whereby they are stable enough to the point they are relied on, which made BlackRock remain having relevance. It built things that lasted. And relevance, once earned, it is almost impossible to remove, especially with how they focused on internal, not just external. That's something you will soon understand if you have not already. People and other organizations wherever in the world all have something in common, and that is wanting services or products or even people or even organizations they can depend on. If you can do that, you become powerful. Now, with all that said, which of these lessons speaks directly to you and your organization? And which one do you feel is already shaping the way you think about your next move? No matter which answer you give, you realize that Larry Fink and everyone else at BlackRock have had quite an emotional roller coaster of a journey. And if you have ever started a business, you would know how emotional it can get. So, when you look at BlackRock's journey from the outside, it's easy to assume it was smooth, calculated, and perfectly executed. But when you pay closer attention, it clearly has not exactly been smooth sailing. They didn't start this global ownership and control from its inception in 1988. There were strategic steps done along the way, even if that was not their initial goal. Because behind every strategic decision, every breakthrough, every moment of dominance, there were doubts, risks, and moments where everything could have collapsed. And that's where the real story lives. Think about it. A company that started with nothing more than an idea about risk ended up advising governments, stabilizing markets, and influencing global finance. You see the success now, but there were nights where Larry Fink questioned whether the people and other organizations he previously worked for and with would they ever trust him again after his failure. Even during moments where one wrong calculation could have ended the entire vision. Yet they kept going, and that's hard for anyone to forget once you've experienced it. There is also irony in the rise of BlackRock. The very thing that destroyed Larry Fink's career is that risk, is the same thing he mastered so deeply that it rebuilt his legacy. You've probably experienced something similar. The thing that once humbled you becomes the thing that sharpens you. The thing that once embarrassed you becomes the thing that defines you. That's not just business. That's human. Because what you ultimately go through ultimately makes your experiences an invaluable asset. And when you add up everything together, you eventually come out victorious. Where you realize organizations finally see what you've been building. When governments call you. When institutions rely on you. When your work becomes the backbone of something bigger than you ever imagined. That's the moment every ambitious person secretly dreams of, even if they never admit it. What do you think? And there is also weight. Because when the world depends on you, Even if other people are unaware of how your firm is, what positions economic stability and growth, you don't get to fail quietly. You don't get to hide. You don't get to make excuses. That is the price of true influence. The higher you rise, the more responsibility you carry. The more people expect from you. The more your decisions ripple across lives you'll never meet. I know it sounds scary, and the way BlackRock has become literally a BlackRock for the world. You may not want your company to achieve such accomplishment, but think of it this way. Like we said earlier, your idea can turn into ideas you never once thought was possible. Even if you now see anything as possible, don't let this put fear in you. Let it motivate you to push your organization to also accomplish great things. Therefore, let me know, what are your thoughts on what the principle of BlackRock's journey is? The principle, when it's all said and done, the influence and the global reach, you're left with one truth that sits at the center of BlackRock's entire journey. And if you pay attention, you'll notice this truth applies not just to trillion-dollar institutions, but to you, your organization, and anyone trying to build something that lasts. The principle is simple. Power belongs to whoever creates stability in a world full of uncertainty. Think about it this way. People don't follow the loudest voice. They follow the voice that calms the noise. They follow the organization that reduces the chaos and confusion. They follow the leader who brings clarity when everything else feels chaotic. BlackRock didn't rise because it demanded authority. It rose because it became the one institution others could rely on when it mattered most. And the same dynamic plays out in your personal journey and business journey. Ask yourself where, and you will see it. So on that note, people gravitate toward whoever makes their lives easier, safer, and more predictable, more reliable and stable. Ask yourself, is that you? This principle also reveals something deeper about strategy. That is, influence isn't built through force. It's built through consistency, through competence, through long-term thinking. BlackRock didn't chase trends. It built infrastructure. It didn't chase attention. It built relevance. It didn't chase power. It built trust. And trust, once earned, becomes the strongest form of leverage any organization can possess. Do other people and other businesses trust your organization? There's also a personal layer to this principle. Every leader, every entrepreneur, every ambitious person eventually realizes that success isn't about doing everything. It's about doing the right things repeatedly. It's about becoming the person others depend on. It's about building a foundation strong enough that people feel safe standing on it. That's what BlackRock mastered, and that's what makes them everlasting. You can also do the same. But here's something you definitely should not overlook. Stability is created internally before it's recognized externally. BlackRock became a global anchor because it first became internally disciplined, internally structured, internally aligned. And once the inside was solid, the outside followed naturally. So the real principle behind BlackRock's journey is this, that if you can become the most stable force in an unstable environment, people will choose you every time. Especially when you provide quality assurance consistently, which is how and why BlackRock owns the world. But the world is yours too. Now tell me, what are you going to do?